What do you want your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren to remember about you?
That I wasn't always the mean old crab. I'd like my grandchildren to remember that I loved them very, very much, and that I'm so proud of all of them, and so thankful for all of them, and to always enjoy life, enjoy what the Lord has given you, no matter what it is, how little it is, or how much it is, and try to share that with others. Hi, I'm Betty Lee Daly Cox. I'm 13 years from being 100, okay? And I mean, it sounds fancier than being 87, right? I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, on 34th Street in Hamden, in Act 710, West 34th Street, on November the 21st, 1928. My father never said anything about it, but I was born on the second floor in the back room, and it's a very small room, and they said that the story I heard was that my ears were hanging off. And my grandmother massaged me with, my father's mother, massaged me with oil, and you know, apparently I came around, and I was a pretty big kid. I think I weighed 9 pounds something. So anyway, that's all I can remember about my birth. Well, I didn't have any brothers, and my sister, who's living today, Carolyn Sue, Susie as we know her, was born 9 years and some months later, and but we had another sister, Jane Elizabeth, who was killed when she was 18 months old in a traffic accident. My mother and father were on their way to Annapolis, and 2 coal trucks were racing, and they came around a bend on the old Annapolis Road and hit them, and apparently Jane Elizabeth was thrown from the car, which was like a Model T Ford, and she died the day after the accident. And my mother didn't walk for a year. She was so traumatized by it. But, you know, I was born probably about 3 years after that. I always felt loved and had a pretty happy childhood, although my mother and father never got along. I mean, they really disliked each other very much. And I guess it was because maybe of the accident, but they finally separated the year I graduated from high school, and Susie stayed with my mother, and I went off to the University of Maryland, but I stayed with my father at that time, when I'd come home on weekends. But Daddy and Mother both, you know, really made me feel loved, and my father did a lot of things with me. He would take me and my friends to the roller skating rink. He would, you know, take us to different places. I remember going to baseball games with him, not the professional ball games, but just local. And Mother always read to me. That was the most thing I remember about my relationship with my mother. She read to me from a very early age, and I learned to love reading. In fact, we would act out stories, like Gone with the Wind. We'd take parts, and I was only 9 years old at the time. And then Daddy finally, he had always wanted to go back to farming because he had been raised on a farm. So then when I was 13, probably 13, when we moved to the farm in Owings Mills, Maryland, and then I went to Franklin High School, and it was very upsetting because we had lived in Linthicum, and I had very close friends there, and the war had started. World War II had started, and it was just very difficult for me to leave Linthicum. But if we hadn't, I'd have never met your grandfather and fallen in love with the most handsome man in the world, as I thought. And he was just great. Is great.
Did you enjoy school back then?
Yes, I loved school. It was my escape from what was going on at home. Oh, I hated math. And I wasn't real good at science either. But I loved English and I loved history. And I loved athletics. Loved those two. Loved music, but I was had a terrible voice, and just didn't make it into the choirs.
So what were your hobbies back then?
Probably riding my bike. and reading and writing. I like to write stupid little poems and stuff like that.
Do you have any poems from back then?
Yeah.
Where do you keep them?
Somewhere. I'm not. Somewhere I have them.
Can you remember any?
Not in my memory, no. But I wrote about different subjects. I was also a Girl Scout. I loved Girl Scouts when I was in elementary school. Well, I had two very close friends. This one gal, and she and I were the tallest girls in the class from 4th grade on, until the boys finally grew up. And we're still friends to this day. So we've been friends for 70-some years. And she and her family were very nice to me, and we were very close. But then I had another friend who we were very, very close. And she didn't live in our community. She lived a little distance away, but we spent a lot of time together. And I would stay overnight at her house, and she at mine. But because my mother and father were always very accepting of my friends and very friendly with them, and they'd always welcome in our home. Mother and Daddy were both very hospitable, even though they didn't like each other. And we had good times together. We were very close with my father's family. And my mother's family until after they separated, and then my mother's family kind of wrote me off. So, yeah, when I grew up, I wanted to be a famous newspaper reporter, report all over the world. But then I realized I was afraid of flying.
So that ended.
That ended. Well, that and my inability to really pass courses. Well, I graduated from high school in 1946, and that was the year that my mother and father separated. And I went down to the University of Maryland in September. My dad and I left the farm the day he took me down to university. And that was a difficult day. So was my graduation day. But at any rate, I was down at the University of Maryland, and my roommate was a good friend from high school. In fact, my father had gotten an apartment in Glendon. It was right across the street from this friend. And Ann and I were together for a year. We both pledged to a sorority. I wasn't doing well in school, in my studies, so I was not able to become a member of the sorority, which was a blessing from the Lord. I knew that later. And and I also worked part-time in the cafeteria at the university. What else do I want to tell you about that? Anyway, the second year of college, I was really doing very poorly and flunked out. So then I went to work trying to think. My father got me a job at Hunter Wilson Distillery, which was in Owings Mills, not far from where we lived. And I worked in the office there, just kind of doing odd jobs, clerical work. And I would write letters for the manager of the distillery that he needed to send out. But then they needed, Hunter Wilson was the distributor, although they had a bottling plant there, and they made and bottled whiskey. Theirs was an overseas company, I guess you'd say. All their liquor went overseas. But they were a subsidiary of Calvert Distilling Company, which was in Relay, Maryland. And they needed a switchboard operator down there because it was a bigger facility and all. And so I was sent down there to learn the switchboard, which I did, and I loved it, and being a talker that I am. But at any rate, got pretty good at it, and was down there. But in the meantime, Grandfather and I got married, and your Aunt Carol decided to come along shortly after we got married. So I could only work till December because they had a rule that, pregnant women could only stay so long. So after that, I was just at home. But anyway, that was my job. And then after all three of our kids were born, your father, and then your Aunt Kathy, I started doing some substitute teaching because in the 70s, I guess it was the 60s, really, in the 60s, they were desperate for just warm bodies to fill the classrooms. And I taught in some elementary schools, and even in a middle school, and loved doing it. But then the ruling came down that you had to be certified and, a really good teacher, trained teacher. So I lost that job. But then I got a job at the Heck Company, which was a department store, and I was on the switchboard there, and had a good time doing that. But then I also worked as a coder for the the Maryland State Transportation up at the State Police Building in Pikesville, and it was a job that we only worked the school year dates, and so that worked out for me too because Kathy was still in school. One of the most memorable events was World War II. I mean, I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and I think we had finished dinner after, because I always went to church. My parents didn't, but I did. And I always liked to listen to the radio. In fact, that was probably one of my hobbies too. Found out later, your grandfather, that was one of his hobbies. But we were listening to the radio, and the report came across that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. Well, I had no idea where Pearl Harbor was. And my sister was probably about 2 or 3 years old at the time. And of course, fire sirens went off quite frequently at that point because we had to take cover. And because we didn't live far from Fort George G. Meade, and they were doing a lot of training there, and our community kind of became involved with that. Anyway, that's the most memorable world event. Of course, the most wonderful event was when I became a Christian. And the most wonderful and exciting thing, your grandfather had become a Christian the year before me.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you found Jesus, or how Jesus found you?
Well, I know now that he had been with me for a long, long time and had, been working on me, even as a child. But we had what was called a lay witness mission at our Methodist church in Pikesville. This was after your grandfather and I were married. I can't remember how many years, but several. And these people came from all around the area, out of state and everything, and from different churches, and they gave their testimonies how they had come to know Christ as a personal Lord and Savior. And in fact, we had a couple and their daughter stay in their home, and I thought, oh, these people are probably a bunch of hillbillies. And so I took an old shower curtain and put it under the mattress pad because I was afraid they had bugs or something. I can't believe I did that. They were wonderful people. We became close friends, but just lovely people. And Grace, the wife, had a beautiful voice, just beautiful. And she sang during this time and really impressed your grandfather and a couple of other people who gave their testimonies. He really was changed. And on Sunday morning, he gave his life to Christ. And I thought I was caught up in the emotion of it all. And I thought I had done the same. But I realized for a year I was faking it. And then one night, I couldn't sleep. And so I got up, and I got a book, and I can't remember the gal's name now who wrote it, but it was called Woman to Woman. And I don't know what I was reading, but I was sitting on the clothes hamper in the bathroom with the door shut. And all of a sudden, I said, Lord, I just can't handle it anymore. And this panoramic thing of my whole life flashed in front of my eyes, and this big light came over me, and I knew at that point that I had been accepted by the Lord. And after that, I just had such freedom and peace, and learned to respect and accept my husband more than ever. And I learned to be, well, I guess you'd say a submissive wife, but not the kind that, I just was a floor mat or anything like that. Because Bill had been so loving and kind to me all that year, and he had changed so much. And I couldn't believe what a wonderful, strong man he was. And it was just, I get chills thinking about it now. Anyway, that's the long story of how I came to know Christ. A friend of ours had a birthday party, and her parents rented the pool in Glendon, and the party was there. And your grandfather was a part of the group that came, and I went with another fella from the group. Well, we got to the pool, and he kind of went off and left me. And here I had curled my hair, because I had this poker straight hair. I had curled my hair and got myself all dressed up. Well, I'm not a swimmer, and I definitely was not a swimmer at that point. And so we get to the pool, and everybody's jumping in the water, and well, I'm jumping in the shallow end and dancing around, being real cute. And all of a sudden, I heard somebody talking about, I heard the boys talking about throwing the girls in the pool. All of a sudden, this tall, lanky guy comes and picks me up and carries me to the deep end of the pool, which was 9 feet deep, threw me in. Well, I went down and down and down, and I'm going glub, glub, glub. And finally, I hear my friend saying, well, one of the times I came up, "You fool, she can't swim." And with that, he and another fellow jumped in and pulled me out. Well, of course, I looked like a drowned rat at that point. All my curls were gone. And your Uncle Graham called me Curly from then on. But anyway, your grandfather felt terrible. And so, you know, there's an old Chinese proverb that if you save someone's life, you're kind of, what doesn't say, I'm not quoting, you're stuck with them for life. You have to protect them. And I guess he took that seriously. So that was how we really became acquainted. And he started being interested in me. Well, I was at Franklin High School, and I'm pretty sure I was a senior, but his grandfather was going to Fork Union Military Academy, and so, but his brother Graham was going to our school, to Franklin High School, and I guess, well, no, we were juniors, that's right, and Graham had to leave Franklin to go to Fork Union with your grandfather because they felt that was the better school for him. And but I had known Graham, you know, all that time. But then after they went to Fork Union, we were having a dance at Franklin on I guess it was a Friday night, and Graham had been a very social butterfly. I mean, all the girls loved Graham. He was so popular and everything, and such a bird. But anyway, your grandfather came to the dance with him, and I knew that Graham had a brother, but I didn't, you know anything else about him. And I saw this at Franklin. You walked in the front door, and then you had to go up some steps to get into the auditorium area. And your grandfather was standing there leaning against the door frame. This tall, handsome, silent guy. And I took one look at him, and somebody said, "Oh, that's Graham's brother." And boy, my heart just went floppity flop. And I think I was later introduced to him, and we just said hi, that sort of thing. And I can't remember, I don't know whether we danced. Sorry, I keep looking over at him. It's hard not to do it. But anyway, I can't remember whether he danced, but then they would come home on weekends, and kids in those days went around in groups. They didn't do so much dating as every boys and girls all together. We would get together in people's homes and that sort of thing and do things together. And then I guess it was the following Christmas when I was a senior. We were at a friend's home for a Christmas party, and they had a ping pong table. And your grandfather and I were playing ping pong, and he's an excellent ping pong player. And I was kind of good, but nothing like him, and he was letting me win. And we played for quite some time. But then it got to be midnight, and we were still together. And of course, at midnight, New Year's Eve, you always said, "Happy New Year," and kissed. But anyway, we did, and he said something about getting to know each other, and he said, "We're going to spend more time together." And so we kind of started dating after that when he was able to come home. So it was really thrilling. And that's how we met and how we started, going together. We mostly double dated with Graham and whoever. Well, it was one of my good friends. Unfortunately, after she went off to Northwest College, she became pinned to another fella without Graham knowing it, and because I think he was planning on marrying her. Grandfather and I became engaged. We had been dating for some time, and we were going to a dance. It was put on by one of the local organizations, and his mother and father, and his sister Dottie, and his brother JR, and his girlfriend, or his wife. That Aunt Jackie was his wife at that time. Anyway, they were all going to this dance at the Pikesville Armory, and we were going also. And of course, I was all dressed up, for this. And this was in November, close to my birthday, which was the 21st of November. And his mother, her birthday was November the 15th. And so Bill came to the apartment where my father and I were living, and to pick me up. And my dad was working night shift at that time at the distillery. So Bill came and he said, "What would you like for your birthday?" And I said, "Oh, nothing." And he said, "Oh, surely you want something." And I said, "Oh, a kiss from you." And he said, "Well, I don't know whether he said, well, maybe you don't need this, or I do have something for you." I can't remember now. But anyway, he pulled out this box, and it had this ring in it. Well, I had no idea that he was, going to propose, but you never did. He just gave me the box with the ring in it. And I never, ever polished my fingernails. That night, I had polished my fingernails. And so he put the ring on my finger, and we went off to the dance. Well, I was just blown away. And we went off to the dance, and of course I had to show it, off to everybody. And, everybody was congratulating us. And I was just...
Do you still have the ring?
I beg your pardon?
Do you still have the ring?
Yes, I still have the ring. It's not in the original setting because it was in a gold setting, and then it's still in the gold setting now because it was originally in white gold or whatever that other stuff is. Yeah, I can't wear it anymore because my finger has, the arthritis has taken over. I'm engaged author now. This church, our wedding day was at the Methodist Church in Glendon, and my Aunt Jenny, my father's sister, sort of stood in for my mother because my mother and I were estranged at that point, and my father gave me away. Bill's mother and father were wonderful to me. I can't say enough about my mother-in-law. She was just great. She really wanted me to invite my mother, but I was not very nice at that point. But anyway, the wedding went off very nicely. I thought we had a pretty large wedding party because I had my sister, my cousin, and two friends. One friend, and Blanche, who was engaged to Uncle Graham, to your Uncle Graham, and he had his brother. Well, his brother, J.R. or Newell, sang at our wedding because he had such a beautiful voice, and your father was your best man? Yeah. and then Dottie's husband, Vernon, and I can't remember who else, Graham. Anyway, it was a pretty large wedding party. And then we had the reception at the Women's Club of Glendon, which is the old schoolhouse in Glendon where my father went to school. And it's still, there today in a very nice place. And my sister is very active in it. It started to rain right after the wedding ceremony. We left the Women's Club and went down to Bill's mother and father's home in Sudbrook Park, and changed clothes there, and then we went off to the Lord Baltimore Hotel to spend the night there, and then the next morning we shipped off to the Eastern Shore. And we were going to spend the week down at Dewey Beach, where friends had a cottage. Anyway, we had to take the ferry to cross the bay at that point because the bridge wasn't built. They were starting to build it. So we got on the ferry and went across to the other side. Oops, I keep pushing that thing. Am I causing a problem? Anyway. It started to rain, but your grandfather started taking pictures of the construction of the Bay Bridge. They were putting the pilings in at that point. Those are the only pictures we have of her honeymoon, because when we got to the other side, it started to really rain. When we got to the cottage, it was raining so hard, and he pulled up very close to the building, and just in a matter of like 3 feet, we both were soaked. I mean, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was raining so hard. And the whole week it rained. And they were right on the ocean. You couldn't even see the water because of the rain. And so we finally decided, I think we came home a day or two early, or went home a day or two early. But in the meantime, we went up to Rehoboth for a meal one night, and then one night we had gone to the store, and I fixed what I thought was your grandfather's favorite foods, which was egg salad, which turned out to be runny, and peas, which he really doesn't like, and they were hard as rocks, and ham and a raisin sauce that was gummy as anything. And so it was such a disaster, and I started crying. And he kept saying, "But it's delicious." It was so funny. Anyway, we came home, and that was our wedding. At our wedding reception, I should say, I forgot about that. We had cake, and your grandmother Cox had ordered these special ice cream figures, and it was very, very nice. In our first, probably, 10 or 15 years of our marriage, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I sort of felt that I knew how to be a better parent, because we did have children right away. We had, 3 kids, but it wasn't, that wasn't difficult, because everybody else in the family had kids. So we were just, it all fit in very well. But I like to take the lead in everything. I planned everything, and I felt, although I loved your grandfather, I just didn't feel he knew what was best in raising the kids and making certain decisions. And it was after I became a Christian that I realized I needed to back off and let him take the lead. And at that point, it was wonderful, because he just blossomed and you know, was, I mean, I never was, I guess, impressed with his height. And, you know, he was a tall man. I was a tall girl at that time. And so, you know, that wasn't any big deal to me. But after that, he just was a giant in my mind and my heart. And we had a great marriage. I mean, I've always felt, and even then, even before then, I always felt very safe with your grandfather. I mean, he was always there for me. He forgave me all my faults and mistakes and things. He's just been a very loving, kind, generous man. And he said, you want me to make it longer? Anyway, and he was a hard worker. I always, before I became a Christian, I always kept pushing him to push ahead. You know, tell them at the work that you should be a superintendent, that you should be, you know, not just a ordinary worker on the job. You know, you should, because he was so knowledgeable about work and the things that they were doing. And he would train others, younger men than him, and they would become his bosses. And I couldn't believe it. But at any rate, and not long after he became a Christian, he finally spoke up and said, you know, I deserve better than this. And then he, you know, became a project manager with the company, and then the company broke up, and he ended up becoming president of the company that he and 6 other men formed. So, I mean, God, and what he did, the work that he did in the church, I mean, woo. He's just been an amazing guy. The Lord has provided me with a wonderful husband, just one, and 3 children, 3 wonderful kids, and plus, no, I shouldn't say just 3 children, 6 children, because I have, you know, 2 sons-in-law, and 1 daughter-in-law. And I always tell your mom that the Lord only gave us 1 son because he knew that we were going to have the best daughter-in-law, so we couldn't afford to have any other sons. And so that's 6 kids, and then 7 grandchildren, but there's also 1, 2, 3, no, just you and Victoria, Mike and Megan, that's 4, and Miranda and Dom, that's 6, and who else? And then we have Chris Belcher and Josh and Nathan. Well, and I have to include Debbie. Anyway, however that adds up. and then 7 great-grandchildren. Well, we had 3 kids, and Carol was our oldest. She was born in 1951. We were married in 1950, by the way. Carol was born in 51 in July, and we had been married in September. Then your father was born in 53, and Kathy was born in 56. Carol was just a delightful little girl, very sweet, and I thought, you know, just very, very feminine, until the day when she was 2, and she pulled out the drawers in a chest in her room and decided to climb on top of it. And then we heard this horrible crash. And she was a tree climber and things, but and then became very musical, as you know. Your father was a delightful little boy. He was so good. He never gave us any problem. And he was into all kinds. Well, he was the tree climber. I mean, when we lived, the house we lived in on Howard Road had trees in front of the house, and I don't know how tall they were, probably 50 feet at least. And he would climb up at the top of the tree and say, "Hey, you can see Pikesville from here." and when he was very young, he was also very naive. We had friends over one time, and Jimmy, the boy who was a year older than your dad, he said, "You know what? If you stand on top of that clothes pole," because we had clothes trees, you would call them, where you hung up, you strung lines between it and you could hang up the clothes. And Jimmy said, "Billy, if you get on top of that clothes tree," which was a T, like a T, he said, "and you put your arms out, you'll fly when you when you jump off." Well, I was like, 5 feet from the ground. Well, of course, your father did a belly flop on the ground. Oh, man. But, he was a great kid. He played Little League ball. Your grandfather was one of the coaches, and nobody wanted to be a catcher. Well, guess who ended up being the catcher? Because nobody, and being left-handed, was a little different for the team. But at any rate, he did a great job, and he was in Boy Scouts, and he just grew up to be a really great kid. And then when he found the Lord, that was very exciting. Your grandfather and I were already Christians. Aunt Carol she was in college at the time, and she was very angry because she said something had happened to us that she didn't like. We were different. And but later on she did. But your father came home from school one day, and I was vacuuming in the front hall, and he came in and he said, "I met somebody today." And I said, "Oh?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You know who it is? Don't you know who it is?" And I looked at him and I said, "Bill." And he had this teacher for study period who was a Christian. In fact, he was eventually fired, and he would sing Christian songs to the kids using his guitar. And as your dad was leaving the classroom one day, he had the Cross and the Switchblade, a book, I can't remember the guy's name, on his desk. And Bill said, "Oh, my parents have read that book." And the fellow said, "Have you read it?" And he said, "No." He said, have you accepted Christ? And he said, "No." He said, "Would you like to?" And with that, he led him to the Lord. And so that was your father's experience. Your father then started a Bible study in our home for his friends, and it grew to be, about 30 kids. And then your Aunt Carol finally became a Christian. She had the singles group from Chapelgate with Dick Ireland started coming to our house. And then Kathy had accepted Christ, but then her life took a different turn, and she got into some difficulties. She had a child, Carrie, and we ended up raising Carrie. But Kathy's life has turned around. We just pray and hope that someday she and Mike will come to know the Lord. But anyway, that's her children.
What's the most difficult and most rewarding things about getting older?
Well, the most difficult thing is the fact that you can't move as well for me because I guess my health situation, maybe because I haven't taken care of myself as well as I should, is not having the arthritis and things like that, health situations. That's probably the most difficult. And also losing friends. People die, and as we all are. And the fact is, you really get old, your children think that you need constant looking over. But the most rewarding thing, whenever I go to the store, I have people constantly wanting to help me or are very kind. They're just wonderful. Also, I think as a Christian, the most rewarding thing is spending more time with the Lord and in His Word, and just feeling closer to Him, being able to trust Him more because you've seen what's happened in years past and seen His faithfulness, His kindness, His generosity, His forgivingness, and even His discipline. That's, to me, that's very rewarding. I even have dreams about heaven, not what it looks like, but what I might be doing. I really think I'd like to help Martha, I can take care of the clay pots in the kitchen, or just other things, and to see loved ones. I don't know really what it's going to be like. My mother always dreamed of the golden streets and all the luxury of it and everything, and it'll probably be that too. But that's I think the most rewarding. And the other rewarding thing is to be living this age and to be able to enjoy our grandchildren and like you, and to see what you're doing. And this brings tears to my eyes because as a little kid, I was about 5 years old, and my grandmother, we were living with my mother's parents, and my grandmother would have, I guess it was the missions group, and these ladies would come and she'd have dessert and they'd talk about China and pray. And I wanted to become a missionary to China. Oh, your grandfather told me when he made his first million, he'd take me to China so we could be missionaries. And that was where we were even engaged. But anyway, that's been the most rewarding thing, that the Lord has let us live this long and for us to still know each other.
How many years have you been married now?
65 this September.
Okay.
And Charlotte, this is your great-grandma, and most of the family call me GiGi now. I love you, and I love seeing you on Skype. I would love to see you in person, but maybe the Lord will make that possible someday. You're a very, very pretty young lady, and I appreciate you very much. I'm glad you love your dad and your mom, and I'm just very proud of you. You're doing very well with school, and it's just exciting to know you. Karis, hi. Oh, it's just so neat to see you and how you've grown, Karis. You're such a lovely young lady and so sensitive, so caring, and you just are a perfect example of a Christian young gal. And I just wish we could spend more time together. I just wish the very best for you. You're such a help to your mom and dad. And thank you for caring for great-grandpa and me, and and showing such an interest in us. We wish you the best. Alana, hey gal, you have quite a interesting spirit. You're very, and you and Karis both are very good at your drawings and your design of clothing and that sort of thing. You have special talents and gifts, and you too are caring about your siblings, and I love the way you all play together and are so what's the word I want to use here, creative and imaginative in the things that you do, and how helpful you are to your mom and dad in their ministry. You children have just been a real blessing with this, and we're so grateful for that. And Tova, hi. It's hard to believe that you're almost, is it 7? Am I getting the right?
Almost 7.
7. Wow. And you no longer do the crooked finger. I can't believe that. Uncle Dan was disappointed, I think. Yeah. But anyway, we're so proud of you, and you're going to be quite the little dancer, I believe. I've watched you when you dance to music and everything, and you're very good with Malachi. You seem to be best friends with him, and I know that's helpful. Although I know he's not going to let you be his boss the rest of his life. Anyway, Tova, you're very creative and just a very special gal. And I'm so glad that you're so loving, and all of you are. Your mom and dad have taught you well, and we're very, very grateful for that. Keep up the good work. Malachi, well, Malachi, you are something else. And with the name of William being your middle name, that makes you really special, you know that? Because you come from a long line of Williams in the Cox family. You're certainly a very masculine young man, and the thing that I've been impressed with, Malachi, when you were looking at the little paper about the toy that we gave you the other night, you were looking at the instructions, and you were able to tell your mom how to put the thing together. And I was so impressed with that, and I think, you're going to grow up to be an architect or something, because you can read blueprint. You'll be able to read blueprints. And but you're also very creative and very loving and very special. And just look out for your sisters, and be gentle with them from time to time. And I know that they're very loving toward you. So we're just grateful for you, Malachi. Anyway, Malachi, hopefully as you grow up, you will be able to express yourself well for the Lord. And I just am so grateful for you. Oh, Cooper. Hi, Cooper. My goodness, you certainly have grown quite a bit, and you're quite the organizer. How you keep everything in order, and you're very friendly, and just a really neat kid, and so loving toward Brooks. You're going to be a great big brother for him. He seems to enjoy being with you too. We're grateful for you, and how you're growing and interested in others. Anyway, continue to be doing what you're doing and growing up to be a fine young man. Brooks, hi, kiddo. You're still pretty young, and we haven't seen a lot of you or get to know you, but we see you through pictures, and you are just the happiest person, and I hope you will always be that way. The Lord loves people who have a joyous spirit, and I just pray that we'll stay with you all of your life, Brooks. You're just a really sweet young man, and gets along so well with everyone, and we're grateful for that.
What life advice would you like to pass on to your grandchildren and great-grandchildren?
Love each other as much as you can. Always forgive. Keep a sense of humor. And the main thing is thank God every day for everything. And praise Him. And trust Him. I would say praise, thanks, and trust. They're the three most important things. And I'm so grateful for what you all are doing in your lives, and how all of you are honoring Him in your own special ways. And that's all I have to say. Well, probably not, but anyway. Thank you, Lord, and thank you, Chris, for doing this. I hope it'll have some meaning for others. And thank you for the most wonderful guy in the world.